Welcome to the Driven to Thrive podcast. This is the place where game changers, entrepreneurs, innovators, and leaders come to share their story of success, how they've redefined to live life on their own terms. I'm Veronica Maldonado-Torres, and today we have an incredible leader to share his life story, the man behind, and who I'm dubbing the stealth servant leader. Today with us, welcome, we have Mr. James A., better known as Micky Blackwell. Thank you for being with us today, Micky. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Well, just to give our audience a little bit of context of who you are, he is the man behind the F-22 fighter plane project. He was executive vice president of Lockheed Martin, led over 36,000 employees located all around the world. Yearly sales during his tenure exceeded $6 billion in annual revenue, and decorated engineer, well known in the aeronautics space, and really an incredible servant leader. I'm so excited to have you on our show today, Micky. Thanks for being with us.
You're welcome.
So today, Micky, we're going to talk about your life as the man behind all of the accolades that you've accumulated in your lifetime, all of the success that you've had, to be able to share with the CEOs and entrepreneurs that are listening today, what really made your success possible, and what does success mean to Micky? What did it mean at the beginning of his career? What does it mean today? And those guiding principles that you have. So thank you for being with us. I'm going to start with our first question. And I want you to, what does the word driven mean to you?
Well, the word driven to me, in fact, every once in a while I do things my wife says I'm obsessed. So, because I focus on a goal, focus on a vision of what I want to do, and I won't let go, just like an old bulldog with a bone. And but being driven, I think, is having a goal in mind, and then deciding how you're going to reach that goal, and setting out on course, and then making it happen.
So, would you say that a part of all that you've been able to do really was that drive behind seeing where you imagined your life to be, or maybe not? What was that thing that propelled you forward? And tell us about your career at Lockheed.
Well, I think it was not quite that simple. When you start out in life, sometimes you really don't know where you're going. And you have a certain set of skills, and hopefully you appreciate what those skills were. And I'll tell you a small story. I wasn't real big into girls. Unfortunately, I was a nerd. But when we were at the junior senior prom without a girl, all us nerds were sitting around, and they said, "What are you going to do in life?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I hadn't thought about it." And I said, "Well, I'm good at math, so I think I'll be an engineer." And that was like in 1957. And so Sputnik had just occurred. And so somebody said, "Well, aeronautical engineers make a lot of money." I said, "That's for me." So really, it was really quite that simple, because I took the skills that I had, and I knew things that would challenge me. And so I set my course to be an aeronautical engineer, but I never set it to be rich or anything like that.
So it was really just a fluke of history, and
it was, in a way.
Not having a girlfriend at the time, and talking around the water cooler about what the future might look like. Hey.
But there were things that I knew I wanted in life. I wanted a good job. I wanted to find a nice lady for me to have as a wife. I wanted family. I wanted relationships with friends, and I wanted to have a lot of fun. So I knew those things that I wanted in life, and I just didn't know quite how to get them just then.
So when you were manifested this, I guess, vision, happenstance, how did that take off after? How did you begin to make the track forward towards inevitably becoming a part of the team at NASA?
Well, my dad, I had wonderful parents. They loved me, and they prayed for me every day. And my dad, from the time I can remember this big, told me that I was going to go to college. Mm-hmm. and they weren't people of great means. And Dad had to stop after 2 years of college. He played football on a scholarship, but the war came in World War II, and he never could finish. But he kept telling me and my brother, "You were going to college." So I knew I was going to school. And now Daddy told me I was going to the University of Alabama. So there just wasn't any doubt that I was going to go into college. And so that part had sort of been planned to head out and to go do. And so I was fortunate to have parents that could send me to school. And so I fell in love with airplanes. I didn't know that I was going to fall in love with airplanes, but I did.
So you fell in love with airplanes. You knew you were going to college. It was kind of already embedded in you. And I think that's a beautiful part, right? Where your parents are kind of foreshadowing what's coming. And so you have no option but to think about anything else.
Exactly.
It was University of Alabama all the way.
All the way.
All the way. Tell us about the influence that your peers, your upbringing had in kind of becoming the man that you've become today.
Well, I think the influence came from a lot of different quarters. I grew up with a fairly large family. It was only my brother and I, but my dad was in a family of 10 and my mother a family of 13. So I had lots of cousins. And so a lot of people to enjoy and to be a part of. So the one thing that I had plenty of when I grew up was love. Mm-hmm. I had parents that gave me as much love as I could take on, stuck up for me, and were really my champions throughout my entire life and supported me. So I think when you look at what your parents do, I had Sunday school teachers, and I went to a real small church. Like 60 in Sunday school, the total Sunday school. But I had a lady that had never married that took us boys under her wing for about 3 years and taught me a great deal about my faith. And so she molded a lot of my character and my values and the things that I want. And so as I had friends, I learned from friends. Over time, I began to learn from bosses. I wouldn't say that all my bosses were perfect or that I would like to emulate them, but usually they had one characteristic that I would love. And I would say, this is something that you need to bring into your life.
So tell us about, one of the reasons that I'm so excited to talk about your journey, and I have dubbed you the stealth servant leader. And you were talking about also the 5 stages of a high performing team after leading so many people, 36,000, $6 billion in sales. The person that was being formed by the influences around you, your faith, your teachers, your family, your community. Tell us about what inspired this servant leadership, and how much did servant leadership, do you think, first of all, what is it? What's servant leadership before I start going down the line? What is servant leadership to you?
Well, a servant leader, there are really 2 kinds of leaders. There's a servant leader, and then there's a self-serving leader. Mm-hmm. Now, a servant leader is one whose goal in life is to serve others, but don't take them for a milquetoast. That person is also focused and intent on achieving the goals. Mm-hmm. Jim Collins wrote a book not too long ago in which he analyzed some of the best companies in the world that have sustained themselves over several decades and outperformed 4 to 7 times other companies. And it's called Good to Great. Mm-hmm. And what he found was there was a commonality. These people were servant leaders. He didn't call them that, but basically they were people that were driven, mm-hmm. they were humble, and that served the people that worked for them. Now, these were CEOs. Mm-hmm. And so the self-serving leader is one that is out to get money, out to get prestige, out to get promoted, and will walk all over your back to get there. And so what I found over time in life is that if you become a servant leader, and remember Jesus said, those that want to be the greatest have to be a servant. And it works. Jesus was the greatest leadership model of all time. And if you take that and you apply it in the marketplace, if you apply it in a charity, you apply it in a church, it works. It just works because you have relationships that people enjoy and they're willing to work for you.
So how do you think that defining what type of a leader you wanted to be. Well, first of all, when did you define what type of a leader you wanted to be? How did you fall into that notion?
Well, it was interesting. It was not something that I'd even planned on or was on my radar, but I was probably a sophomore in high school.
Okay.
And this was, again, a small town, USA, in North Alabama. And at that time, you could have chapel service. And, they don't have those in school today, I don't think. But nonetheless, we had a minister. He was a Baptist minister from the local First Baptist Church in Jasper, Alabama. And so that was the topic that he spoke on, was servant leadership, and spoke about the person in industry that had pushed it forward by the name of Greenleaf. Mm-hmm. And the more he talked about it, the more it registered with what I knew about my spiritual upbringing and about what I'd observed in life. And I said, this is what I want to do. This is what the kind of leader I want to be. And so that's how I decided that was going to be my model.
From that day forward.
Life, from that day forward.
How did your life change from that day forward? So sophomore in high school.
In high school,
right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you're starting to apply all of these principles of number one, being selfless and sacrificing and leading others. How did that change from there forward for you?
Well, when you say it, it sounds like I'm a goody two shoes. But
and you were.
Well, there are things that I tried to do that were, I think, to help people. I've always wanted to help people. I love people. I love talking to people, and I love to see people get ahead. But you were talking about driven a moment ago. That I think one is, at least me, and I can only speak for myself, that I'm driven for perfection. Mm. I'm driven to attain a goal, and just doing something is just not good enough. You've got to do it well. Mm-hmm. And so I think from that point on, when I realized what it took and how you could get it done well, was by involving other people. And that's when the concept that you can get more done with teams mm-hmm. than you can get with individuals began to occur, began to take shape. And then over time in the rest of my career, I've been able to use teams extremely effective and use those principles to make those teams be high performance teams.
One of the elements that in my time supporting over 150 CEOs that I have noticed, and you mentioned it today, being driven for the sake of driven is not where it's at. There is an element of excellence, mm-hmm. And you mentioned a drive for excellence. How did you manifest that with your teams? Tell us about an experience where that servant leadership mentality, what you'd learned through all of your upbringing, through the impact that sophomore conversation had. How did that manifest years later in managing so many people in such an incredible landscape? Lockheed Martin, technology, innovation. I mean, the organization is known for that, for the rigor, for the perfection, for the excellence. Was there a model of servant leadership prior to your time? And we're talking about, maybe 20 years ago, where maybe it was a culture that was more of yelling. And I know we've had an experience where you had a yelling boss, and how that trickles down. But give us an idea of how that manifested and experienced for you.
Well, maybe I can illustrate it with a story, because really my first major management job was I was promoted to chief engineer of special projects. Mm-hmm. And this was a brand new organization, had nobody in it. And I was being sponsored by one of the chief executives in our company. And he wanted me to start a stealthy organization within our company here in Marietta, Georgia, the Lockheed company here. So I said, okay, great. I'm all for it. But I needed people. So I went to the director of engineering, who reported to this vice president, and I said, I need some people. And, sort of said, I need these kinds. And he said, caught me at a bad time. I don't really have those kind of people. And not only that, they're fully employed, the ones I do have. But I do have some people over here that I'm going to lay off. And you can have some of those people if you want them. So I didn't have any choice but to take those people into the program. It was a classified program. It was a stealthy program. And so we began to excel. Because when you give people a vision, when you care for them, when they know that they can put their trust in you and confidence in you, they will go with you, and they will become high performance. And so a year later, I went back to the same director of engineering, and I said, I need some more people. And he said, you can't have any more people. You already have all the best people. So these misfits had become the best in the company. But yet we began to win contracts, $30 million in 1 year. So it was quite a success story.
So you turned around the folks they were just about to let go, and the ones that were an afterthought per se, and you turned them into the most excellent, revered group that then went on to win contract over contract.
Well, that sounds a whole lot better than I thought I said it.
Well, that's what you did. That's what your
But it's fun to do that
did.
because when you take people that are down, they don't think they're going to draw another paycheck, and then all of a sudden they have a challenge, and they have a vision for what they can do, and excellence is demanded of them. They're shown how to do it. People can just extraordinary excellence can come out of them.
What would you recommend to some of the folks that are experiencing that in their organization? There is a talent war right now in the market, and some that might feel that they have misfits. How can they turn that around? How can they turn them around to make them those excellent part of the drive for excellence team?
Well, it's not easy because you have to lead by example. They have to have to trust you. And by the way, fake leadership, which is self-serving leadership, people can see through it in a second. If they know that you're faking it to try to get them to work harder, you're not going to get anywhere. So it's when they believe you and trust you, then that will happen. I'll tell you another short story. When I was in the F-22 program, we had finished bidding against Lockheed against Northrop Grumman, and we didn't know if we were going to win or not. But we were going to have to move all the people on the program, some 1,000 people, from California to Georgia. And a lot of California people just don't think Georgia's any place to live. We still have plantations and other things. So trying to get those people to come, and if we couldn't get them to come, the government was not going to have confidence in us to do it. So I had to take the time with the employees to help them in every situation they had. It was unbelievable the number of circumstances: selling homes, being uncertain about where they're going to move, schools, and trying to help people overcome the idea of moving to Georgia and being a part of the program when we won to go forward. And so it was so much fun to get people to do that. And I'll never forget, one guy told me as soon as we announced we were moving from California to Marietta, he said, "Look, I can't go. I can't go. My wife will not go. We were both born in California. We cannot live in Georgia." And so I said, "Well, you're going to have to go down. We're going to give everybody a week. So you take your wife, own the company, you go down, you look over Marietta, Georgia, and Atlanta, and see if you like it. And then if you don't like it, come back. I'll transfer you to another organization in California." He said, I got to go this week. And I said, "Fine, well, you can go this week." So I forgot about it. And so about midway during that week, I get this phone call from this young man. And he says, "Micky, I'm in trouble." And I said, "Where are you?" And he said, "I'm in Marietta, Georgia." And I said, "So you went down on your trip to take a look?" And he said, "Yeah, and my wife bought a house." And said, "I need a job offer because we're going to live here." And but people, when you give them a vision of where you're going, you help them, you serve them, it's incredible what they can perform as a team.
What happens when the vision's lost? How can you get a team back on the vision as a leader?
Well, as a leader, when the vision is lost, and in fact, when I had to go to the F-22 program from engineering, I didn't want to go. I didn't want to go because we were losing, and we were losing really big.
Losing as far as
The competition
competition
between us and Northrop Grumman. And in fact, my boss told me that I had to go, that if I didn't go, that he would send me over to corporate as a corporate staffer, and I would be a corporate puke for the rest of my life. And I said, well, since you explained it that way, I'll go. But basically,
thank goodness.
The people were dispirited. The current management were the yellers and the screamers, and they managed by fear. And people don't respond that way. They won't give you extra.
Yeah.
They'll give you what they have to, but they won't give you the extra. And so I did go over and began to change the attitudes, and people saw that I really meant what I said. They could trust me. They could have confidence in our vision of where we were going to go. And the program turned around, and we won it going away. In fact, the Air Force told us that it was the greatest piece of work that they had ever seen.
Wow.
But it was these people that did it.
Yeah.
It wasn't me. It wasn't me. It was them, because they had a dream of what they could be and what they could achieve, and they did it.
But it takes something special to draw that out of people. It takes an element to be able to get them connected to why it matters for them and why it matters for us as an organization. That's where the magic is. That's where the engagement, wouldn't you say, to be able to connect to that vision?
Well, it is. And I think I started telling the story a second ago and got sidetracked. But basically, after as we got ready to leave to come to Georgia, my staff asked me to come outside. And because I'd helped them all to figure out how to move and the whole situation. And every one of them had taken a piece of red construction paper and drawn their hand on it and cut it out and written a thank you note to me, and had posted it on a billboard size mobile billboard to say thank you for not only getting us a win or helping us get a win, but also facilitating all of our issues we're moving to Georgia. So people appreciate genuineness. They appreciate people looking out after them. Let me just tell one more story about servant leadership as to why it's key to making that happen. When I was transferred to Burbank, California from Georgia, and took over a good portion of engineering, I was invited into a classified program review in which they were making a proposal for a new spacecraft. It was classified spacecraft. And I didn't know a lot of the people in California. And so I was on a blue ribbon review team, because it's a murder board. We have to make sure that everything the Air Force or government has asked for is to the T. And so one particular young man that was working in thermodynamics was having a really hard time, an engineer. He was just raked over the coals terribly. And so it was all over. And so I walked up into what we call a bullpen, which is where this program was. And I noticed this young man over in the corner and this old man sitting over there with him. And so I asked somebody, who is that old man? They said, you don't know who that is? And I said, no, I don't know who it is. They said, well, that man's name is Willis Hawkins. He's a legend in Lockheed Martin. He was the president of the California company, then formed the space company, moved it to Palo Alto, and was president of that. But I saw him over doing grunt work. And so when you're a servant leader, you're willing to get rid of the red tape, get rid of the things and let your people work, and to facilitate, even do grunt work if necessary. And when people see that, they know that you care for them, and they know that you're going to help them get to where they want to go, and they'll follow you.
And that's the leadership in by example, to see them rolling up their sleeves. That's an incredible image that you've given us. Talk to us about the challenges that kind of defined your career or your life. Give us an example of some of the things that might have impacted you along your trajectory, your leadership trajectory.
Well, these sort of sound like things that I thought were bad as I went along, and I do have a few of them. In fact, there were several times that I thought I'd run off the rails, and that's never pretty at the time that it's happening. But I took my first job out of college with NASA in Langley, Virginia, and it was just at the time that they were moving a lot of the people from NASA Langley to Houston to form up the space portion of NASA. And so they had a lot of openings in their wind tunnels in Langley, Virginia. And so I was hired to backfill. Well, it took me 4 years and a summer to get out of college because when Sputnik came, the reviewing agencies came in and dumped another 20 hours on the schools and said, you've got to take what you used to plus another 20 hours. Oh. So I didn't get out till the end of the summer. And by the time I got to NASA, all the jobs that I really wanted were taken. They were called, I would call them structures jobs. And they offered me an aerodynamics job. Well, I didn't want an aerodynamics job. And I thought the world had come to an end. And I was going to have to work night shift. I mean, this was not the vision I had.
Right. Like, where did we, now we're really off track. What happened?
But it was the best thing. It could have happened to me when I was at NASA because I was assigned to work for a genius. And his name is Dr. Richard Whitcomb, who invented something called the area rule that allows us today to fly faster than the speed of sound.
That is
so
incredible.
I became in his bag man, so to speak. I would draw what he told me to draw. And he took me under his wing and taught me all about aerodynamics. So it was a terrific thing that I thought was bad. In fact, I would say nearly every time the things that I thought were going to be the worst things ever always turned out to be the best things. When I got to Georgia and went to engineering there, the same thing happened. I was elected to go be the bag man for our vice president of engineering. Mm-hmm. The space shuttle was getting ready to be launched. And so NASA wanted all of the top engineering executives to look at the space shuttle and review it to make sure there were no hiccups before they launched it for the first time. Well, vice presidents don't do real work. So, they reached out and grabbed me.
They're not rolling up their sleeves?
They reached out and grabbed me and said, you do the work for him and you can travel with him. Well, the first thing I knew, he wanted me to come work for him. Well, I didn't want to do that because, not full time, because I knew he was a self-serving leader and he used people. Mm-hmm. And when you got through with him, he cast them away, usually laid them off. Well, it turned out through a remarkable set of circumstances, I was directed to go work for him. Best thing, again, that ever happened. He promoted me 3 times in 5 years, and I ended up right under him. So, I mean, he was my mentor. He gave me opportunities to do things I would have never had a chance. And so life goes on like that. The same thing happened on the F-22. I was told to go over, as I mentioned a minute ago. And I would just give you one more because things don't always turn out right.
Right.
After I retired from Lockheed, I started a bank here in Georgia. And we raised more money than any local bank had ever raised to start it with. But unfortunately, it was 2005. And by 2008, the world had come to an end for small banks, and we went under. And so, and the only point I want to make is that sometimes you just have to pick up and go on.
Keep on
and
going.
You learn that lesson. So things don't always end up rosy. Things sometimes don't end up as the way you would want them to be. Things may not be fair. But when they're not, you just pick up and go to the next one.
Wouldn't you also say, however, that there are invaluable nuggets of lessons learned when they don't turn out the way you think?
Exactly.
So for you, out of some of those scenarios you shared, what was one of the lessons that you learned, apart from keep it moving forward, keep it moving no matter what? It's not the end of the world. What looks like, a diversion or a distraction is actually a way to get you on your actual path to aeronautics, right? What's been one of the lessons, the nuggets that you've learned in those moments?
Well, I don't know if you call this a nugget or not, but one of them is don't go in the banking business.
Not at the height of the recession, right? Well, you couldn't have foretold that.
But there is a nugget in there, in that you need to stay in the kind of business you know something about. Okay. And I thought I could do that, and And probably in any other time, it would have been successful. But one of the things it did push me into was public service. And so from that standpoint, I worked for 8 years for Governor Barnes and Governor Perdue, and also our mayor of our little town in Marietta. I did the replanning of the city for moving it forward, and it's a great place now to live in and to be in. Our city square is humming all the time, and so to see those accomplishments were just as much to me as seeing an F-22 fly for the first time.
Incredible. In our conversation earlier, you talked about really understanding the values, your core values, what success means in your life. What has success meant for you? And how did you live that out with your family? As a high executive leading 36,000 people, where did your core values come into play as a leader within a major organization, at the forefront of incredible programs, but also still being a family man?
Well, I think I could probably tell you about the core values, but you probably had to ask my family if I was successful to them. But I think being in touch with your core values and what's important to you is extremely important to your well-being, your mental well-being. The thing that I have seen so many people that I've run into in the 50 years I've been in the business world now is just one faux pas, and they lose their integrity. If they lie one time, if they lose the trust of their employees one time, and people no longer have confidence in them, you can't get it back. It's just nearly impossible to get it back. And so it's so important for young people and people that follow on in leadership roles to make sure that they have a set of core values that are good, and they stay with them all the time. They never let their guard down and tell an untruth or now I'm prone to exaggerate from time to time, but my family tells me. But I mean, in general, you have to be true to your core values, because people, again, know if you're a fake.
Yeah.
They can spot a fake a mile away.
You mentioned what success meant for you, and you talked about in our conversation earlier how it wasn't just about being a businessman. It was about being present for your children and being present in the community. One of the facts that astounds me today is, with all the demands on your schedule and on your time, is how you made it a priority in your life during those very impactful years, career-wise, to still go and teach Bible school every Sunday. Tell me about where that falls in line with your values, just as a man, as a leader.
Well, I think you have to, when you're trying to set out in life, the worst thing you can do is just take the one leg of the three-legged stool and major on it, such as work, and spend 100 hours a week trying to do nothing but get ahead in your work, thinking that that's going to give you money for your family and take care of your wife. That's not what they want. They want you.
They want you.
They want you.
Yes.
And so trying to come to a balance, and I'm not saying that I did it perfectly, but there were things that I consciously said that I'm not going to do. Like, I didn't learn to play golf until I retired. Things that would take you away from home for many hours. And there were things, and we carried the kids, faithfully to church. Now, faith has always been a part of my life. From the very beginning, my mom and dad, my dad prayed with me every night. He read Bible stories to me. I've already mentioned growing up in a small church, but my faith has meant a tremendous amount. And as an engineer, I believe the Bible, and I'm at total peace with science and the Bible. So I love to teach, especially young adults, about the Bible and why they can believe it and why they can make it a part of their life. At the same time, having enough time for my children, having enough time for friends. I love my friends. I mean, there's nothing gives me more pleasure than to be with my friends and my family. And I can tell you that every day I went to work at Lockheed, I loved it. I loved every day. I cannot think of a day I didn't enjoy going to work.
So you wrote a book called When Two or More Are Gathered in Prayer. And I want to know how much of the principles of servant leadership and did you bring into your or your corporate prayer? I think you mentioned. How much was that a part of your everyday life and the people that you touched
Well,
and
it's
led?
the book that I wrote. I didn't write it until after I had retired from most work and from public a lot of the public jobs that I'd taken on. The one thing that I've mentioned several times in our interview is the importance of teams. That to me, teams are paramount in making great things happen. This is numbers of people. And you can look at every situation, and it's always better if you can get a team working on it and collaborating and putting their skills together. You can get to be a high-performance team. Well, it's no different in religious things. I found that I was working with a group of laymen from around the world, and all of a sudden I was in a meeting and I heard a bunch of guys begin to pray like I'd never heard. I've been in a Baptist church all these years and I'd never heard how they did it because they prayed as though it were one person. And they would just pick up on the end of just like a sing song. It would just keep going. And as it was moving around, it always stayed on one topic. It would never, pray for 8 things and somebody else pray for 8 things. And I said, man, this is incredible. And so as I began to look into it, I found it was very biblically based. And I found that it was hardly ever used in church. And that the Bible actually tells you there's more power if a group of people meet together and are common in purpose. And so I said, I need to write this down. And so that's what I did. I wrote it down and shared it because there's very little information on that out. And it has such power when a team comes together and unites to pray for one particular thing.
Micky, your faith has been at the helm of who you are as a leader. In times where faith can oftentimes be a discussion where people just don't want to embark on, how are you able to be successful in your career trajectory in bringing your faith into your work?
I don't think that it's a overt thing. I think it's more of a subtle thing where people see it as you live your life, where they see your core values, they hear you speak, and if they're interested, they will ask you, where do your core values come from? I mean, but it'd be in much more gentle ways than that. It's just a normal conversation that it comes up. But there are opportunities that a person has in the workplace when we have dinners. I didn't have any problem having everybody pray at the beginning of a dinner. Now, it's a lot easier in the South than it probably is in other places. But there are opportunities that you can show that you are a religious or a person of faith in subtle ways without being in your face to people. And then hopefully they will see in you some things that they want and will ask you to share it with them, which I think is by far the better way.
What do you want people to know about Micky's life, the man behind the F-22 and the team behind the F-22 project? What would you like to impart to CEOs and entrepreneurs about your life, about your climb, about how you've lived? What would you like to share with them?
Well, I would say don't worry about your climb. You're going to get there if that's what you want. I mean, I've never, as far as I know, I can never remember sitting down and plotting, I want that next job. I want to do this. I want to do that to get there. My total focus was on the job at hand and doing a good job. And I can tell you that doing a good job in the job that you currently have, and if you take as a tenet to make your boss a hero, no matter how bad he is, you make him a hero and he will take you along with him every time. And if you tell your boss what you want out of life, that just remember me when you get ready to make some promotions, and or you want somebody to do this, that I would like to have that opportunity if you think I'm qualified for it. I'll tell you, within a year, you'll get the job. It happens every time. So if you get down to the bottom line of what I would like people to know about me, is that if you will work with people in a relationship where you care for them, where you love them, where you give them a vision, and where you're willing to sacrifice for their well-being, you can achieve anything you want in life.
I think one of the other pieces I really take away from our conversation today is that being focused on where you are and doing that well. Doing that well.
Yes.
Doing that well. What does thriving mean for Micky now? Thriving in your life. What does that mean now?
Well, thriving for me now is probably just having more of a good time than I've had in the past. Enjoying my children, enjoying my grandchildren, enjoying my friends, enjoying my church, and enjoying the charitable jobs that I have. So thriving to me is just having a good time doing all of those wonderful things.
So make sure that as you're working hard, you're having a good time.
And
if you're not having a good time, we got to reevaluate what we're doing. Reevaluate. How often did you reevaluate in your trajectory?
Well, I don't know that it was ever done consciously. I think it was on the fly. And as I went along, this didn't work. So, you need to change and do it a different way. And usually it always came back to the same thing, that I was being a self-serving leader instead of being a servant leader. And
because we're human.
We're human, and I would take control back. Micky, he's good, and the Lord doesn't know what he's doing yet. So in this particular area, but nearly always he was right and I was wrong.
That's that's an interesting dynamic that you share, because there is a struggle, right, between the self-serving and the servant leader as you're growing, as you're understanding the values behind that. So, and there are moments where you have to consciously say, oh, no, we need to go back into what we are at our core and our desire is that servant leadership mentality. And I'm glad that you bring that up, because I think it gives people perspective and awareness and the grace to know that we are not all perfect beings, but that we hopefully should operate always from a place of being a servant leader where we, and one of the words that you mentioned earlier, where we sacrifice for each other, where we go in and go in to win for the team. And you mentioned the 5 stages, right? We mentioned the 5 stages.
But I didn't tell you what they were.
Well, tell me what they are. I thought we mentioned, bring it out.
If you look at a team, and there's a wonderful book called The Wisdom of Teams that I really recommend to anybody that's thinking about a team. And there's another wonderful book by Pat Riley on building the Lakers and how that formed into a team. But a team really starts out in 5 stages. The first stage is just a group of individuals. I mean, just as you and I are a group of individuals right here. We have no connections much other than just a few minutes of chat. And the next stage of developing a team is when you tell those 2 individuals, or 10, or ever how many you have, you're a team. You give them a name. Well, that's called a pseudo team. That means they're a pretend team. Because by and large, they're dumber than if you just poll the intellects of the individuals. For those of you that go to church, just think of church committee, or a school committee. I mean, people don't share, so they close up. So the next level is a potential team. And a potential team all of a sudden realizes that they have a vision. There's some common purpose to their existence, whether it be win a Super Bowl, win an F-22, build a new lunchroom at school or whatever it is. They agree that they have a common goal. They don't know how to get there, but they agree that that's their new goal. Then the next one is they become a real team, in which all of a sudden, guess what? They become a family. And they care for each other. They serve each other. They're willing to pass the ball, let somebody else shoot to the goal rather than hogging it all themselves. They become unselfish. And so when you do, it just unleashes the power of people when they do that. Then the last and the best is called a high performance team, in which that team is sacrifice. When you play hurt, when you don't want to get up and go do something, but you do it anyway for the team. And so, and people see that people are sacrificing to get there. In fact, all through history, it's been this way. You can look at the disciples. We've talked about a few religious things, but Jesus took 12 nobodies, had a year and a half of real teaching, and they changed the world. And look what they did. They argued among themselves. They wanted to be, I want to be chief. No, I'm going to be chief. And yet they began to come to a common vision. And then when they sacrificed, when Jesus sacrificed for them, then they were in and they changed the world.
They were committed.
They were committed and they changed the world. And that happens in everything in life.
And in our organization. So
And in organizations.
when we finally show our vulnerability and build that trust and find ourselves in a situation where we have to sacrifice, work while we're hurt, or, be in the game no matter what, that's when a true high performing team comes to the heart kind of connects, because you go beyond in a different way.
Well, everything has to connect. There are really 4 parts that have to work in unison. The first is the heart. You got to get a hold of the heart so that they put their heart in what you want to go. And then the intellect has to kick in, because the head puts structure to what you're going to do. And but you can't, without your hands doing something, your heart and your head, they're not enough. And then finally, you have to have your habits. The habits, the things that you do, like your prayer time daily, or you're sitting down with your wife at breakfast every morning and talking rather than reading the newspaper. But the habits you have to promote the well-being of the team.
Would you say that you have achieved satisfaction with the way that you've lived your life?
Well, I would say absolutely yes. But here I need to pause and add in, I could have never achieved it without my wife. She is a perfect match.
Teamwork makes the dream work. And I see how moved you are in sharing that importance of having someone who elevates you as you continue to grow and to become the person that you're destined to become.
It's just another form of team.
It's just another form of team. And that's probably one of the best teams, is to know that you've got someone next to you that will ride the storms with you, that will make that be there when the pivot happens and you think your world is caving. And really it's an opportunity, right? We're talking about the first challenge you had.
Yeah, and also tell you to straighten up and fly right. So.
And course correction. Oh, that's beautiful. I'm moved by seeing the sentiment behind that bond with your wife, and definitely the team that you have had in order to impact over 36,000 people. So thank you to her as well. And we're just grateful to share your story today, Micky, about the incredible servant leader that you've been in your workplace, in the community, and for those that you continue to serve.
Well, thank you, Veronica. You can't do it without other people, though.
That's
You have to have other people. No man is an island. And but thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure to talk to you and share a little bit about my life.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for being with us today, Micky. On behalf of all of us here at Driven to Thrive, we are very moved by your story and want to thank you for spending time with us here today.
Thank you very much for having me, Veronica. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to us here on Driven to Thrive, the podcast where game changers, innovators, leaders, and entrepreneurs share their story about how they've defined success to live life on their own terms. To follow us or for more information, visit us at VMT Speaks on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us.